Okay, every picture tells a story. Two black figures in 18th century European paintings. We're familiar with the idea of black people being slaves in both Europe and North America. However, there were some, few, who weren't. Dido Elizabeth Bell was one of those people who occupied a position in English society known as that of the poor relation. She was the illegitimate daughter of Rear Admiral Sir John Lindsay, who, after her mother died, took Dido to England to be raised in the house of Lord Mansfield. Lord Mansfield just happened to be the most powerful judge in England at the time. In the foreground of the picture you're looking at is Lady Elizabeth, who was also sent to live in Lord Mansfield's home after her mother died. Dido's place in the household, however, was peculiar. She wasn't a sister, she wasn't a servant. Dido was only sometimes asked to join guests at dinner, and often she was only invited to sit in the drawing room or walk in the garden with guests, not to share food. Look closely at the painting. What do you see? Who's in the foreground of the picture? This picture, painted by a man named Martin, we see Lady Elizabeth in the foreground, sitting book in hand, calm, relaxed, and the ideal English shade of white. Dido, in the background, is by far the more interesting yet tragic figure. She is holding a servant's bowl, which tells us something about her status in the household, overflowing with fruit. If you take a look at the way each of the figures is positioned, you can see the restful, still posture of Lady Elizabeth, again modeling the ideal of the English lady. Dido, on the other hand, is in motion, not just leaning forward, but you can see her left thigh outlined against her dress, indicating that she's on her way somewhere, and the flowing of her diaphanous wrap also gives us a clue that she's on the move. What's also interesting from our point of view is that the ideal of English womanhood, Lady Elizabeth, is restraining her companion Dido. We can read in this some of the ideas that the English had about black people. We can read in this hand on the arm suggesting that it was necessary for the English to curb or restrain the physicality of black people, that black people needed to be made to slow down. There's a lot of other observations you can make about this picture, from the cut and materials of the dresses to the headwear each of the women is wearing. Spoiler, the turban on Dido's head is code for exotic, to the jewelry each is wearing. Check out the ears. In case Next, we move on to Mamadi Make. He is known in Europe as Angelus Soliman, but I prefer to use his given name. He was born in Nigeria and taken as a slave and brought to the slave market in Messina, which is a city in Sicily. It was there that he was brought by a marchesa. A marchesa is just below a duke and just above an earl. The marchesa had Mamadi educated, and he took to it with gusto. However, in 1734, at the age of 13, Mamadi was given by the marchesa to an Austrian prince, who then later sent Mamadi to Prince Joseph Wenzel I of Liechtenstein. Mamadi, however, made the best of this situation. He joined the Zuwaren Eintracht, which means to true unity, lodge of the Masons, and ultimately rose to be the leader of that lodge. Mamadi also became a companion to the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph, with whom he, Mamadi, played chess. And in 1796, Mamadi died of a heart attack. If we take a look at the image to the right by Johann Gottfried Haydn, we see a very dignified man. How do I know that he's dignified? Well, he has his hands holding his lapel, which was a code for dignity in the 18th century. We can tell he's fairly well off from the fur on the cuff of his overcoat and the lion-tipped cane he's holding in his right hand. However, we see elements that tell us that Europeans saw Mamadi as exotic. Start by looking at his headwear. What do you see? A turban, just like Dido is wearing. And look at Mamadi's right ear and tell me again what you see. In case you didn't understand from his turban and earring that Mamadi is exotic, take a look into the background of the image. In the distance, you can see both a palm tree and a couple of pyramids. Just a helpful reminder that clearly the subject of this painting isn't a local. Okay, moving on to the painting done by Bernardo Bellotto of the gardens of the Liechtenstein Gardens, completed between 1759 and 1760. In the right foreground, we see Prince Joseph and Mamadi. What's the first thing you notice when you see these foregrounded people? Oh, and I should tell you that at the time of the painting, Mamadi was 38 years old. Notice that Mamadi is again depicted as an exotic, despite the fact he'd been living in Europe for almost 25 years by the time this painting was completed. And to drive home the exoticism of Mamadi, he's also wearing a turban. Also, notice the difference in size between the prince and Mamadi. And in case anybody ever thought that the Prince Joseph and Mamadi were on an equal footing, Mamadi is carrying a serving tray, a very similar tool to the serving bowl that Dido has on her arm in the other painting. And although it's a bit hard to see in the image, if you follow Mamadi's gaze, or follow Mamadi's eyes, he's gazing or staring at the prince in a fashion similar to the dog on the prince's right side. As Esi Edugyen eloquently puts it, the effect is entirely disempowering. Soliman's size and wide-eyed subservience suggesting a permanent state of childhood, the eternal boy. Thanks for listening.